I'll be joined, we are joined today by two gentlemen you see on the screen. Thomas Wheet, Research and Logistics Coordinator for Urban Agriculture and Entrepreneurship at UDC Center for Urban Agriculture and Gardening Education. Who knew we have so much education about agriculture in a city, in a very urban environment. Thomas, welcome. And also we'll hear from Greg King, who is the president of Blair Road Community Garden in Ward 4. Have I got that right? Yes, all right. So, and I'll take this slide now, Megan. So as I was researching the topic for tonight's talk, I was running into a phrase, food justice. Now we are all familiar with food insecurity, food deserts, but it really is about injustice of the system that makes it difficult for people to access food, not to mention to afford it at times. Next slide. Next. Next, okay. Food deserts. Back to slide number 2, please. Back to slide number 2.
Do you see food
deserts? Food deserts, okay. Thank you. We are in food deserts. So as you see from this map, which of course I Googled things, color-coded supermarkets in different wards of District of Columbia. And in wards 7 and 8, I see only 3. And indeed, supermarkets are unevenly distributed around DC. Ward 7 and 8, only 3 as 2018. As far as I know, that's still true. Ward 5, where there is another significant Black population, is better off with 6 supermarkets. Ward 4, where Blair Road Garden is, has 5 supermarkets. Now, population of our wards is approximately 80,000 people per ward. So 160,000 people have only 3 supermarkets and rather spread out to do their grocery shopping. And as per USDA, Ward 7 and 8 again are where the majority of DC residents is food insecure, meaning that at some point during a year, they are unable to provide adequate food for 1 or more people in their households because they don't have the resources. They maybe don't have that much money, but also they can't easily get to good food sources. Because there is a lack of nearby grocery stores, residents in Ward 7 and 8 in particular, with their low income, they also have to get to supermarkets somewhere, increase transit costs. Or they go shopping at the corner store, which, as we know, usually carries less healthy food options, fast food, nice greasy stuff. But of course, that unfortunately results in health problems. So, next slide. What is the path out of this food insecurity? Well, it's a big systemic problem, but it would help if there was food growing nearby. So we can, if we can grow food, we can help ourselves and each other. I Googled community gardens, and That's what I came up on the first pass. And that is not a full map of community gardens in the district. Even my community garden is not on that map. So tried again. And I went to Department of Parks and Recreation because I am aware that many gardens are they're created and they are still connected to Parks and Recreation programs. Next slide. Next.
It should be Community Gardens DPR map.
So yes, so this is Parks and Recreation map. You will see already more community gardens in all wards, but definitely more in wards 7 and 8. So community gardens is an urban agriculture program available at multiple DPR locations, as we see, within the districts. These gardens are maintained in collaboration with Parks and Recreation and DC citizens, like myself or others. And those are in food deserts, help produce the fresh veggies. In not so food desert neighborhoods like mine, well, we still enjoy the crops we produce. And on this map, I counted 34 gardens, and 9 of them were in Ward 7 and 8, and 8 in Ward 5, which I understand is something of a food desert. Next. Next.
I think there's just a little bit of a delay, Joanna. It's
yeah, okay, right. I'm not sure you hear me. Okay, so, but I also became aware that there are such a thing as urban farms in a city. Terrific. And there are, according to Doug Network, and I'll come back to that, 2 kinds of communal farms. One is a communal farm that is an urban ag site organized as a communal production farm. Again, Parks and Recreation and community volunteers are growing food and providing the food to the community. Partner urban farms are, again, partnership with this Parks and Recreation, but they are run by not-for-profit, essentially, 501c3 organizations. And I run into interesting organizations such as Fort Stanton Urban Farm or Fort DuPont Urban Farm. They happen to be run by DC Urban Greens, one of those not-for-profits. And there are some very interesting things you can find on the website about that. But these are larger spaces and more functioning like a farm with the community benefiting from the food by giveaway, or I think sometimes perhaps affordable food for sale and or at farmers market. I wasn't quite clear if there were differences in how that food gets to people's kitchens. Okay, and last slide. So, Doug Network, which is an organization that is informing and connecting DC residents about the resources, events, opportunities, forums, services, and programs that support food access, healthy eating, urban agriculture, and environmental sustainability in greater DC areas. They produced this map of all food production, food growing, and green spaces in the district. Blue is the community gardens. purple is the production, urban agriculture, the farms. And there are other public gardens, and I'm not quite sure about the orange being education, garden, educational programming. I would need to research more about that. Perhaps it's gardens related to schools. Anybody knows about that? No. So there are lots of places in the district where we are growing food. It gets to people's tables. We grow it on a small scale in the plots like mine, 4 by 12. We grow it on a larger plots, such as in Blair Road Farm, community garden, apology, and as grown in urban farms. And I believe that some of them are already grown on roofs, like roof of University of District of Columbia. So now I would like to invite Thomas Wheet to tell us more about his involvement in food growing, urban agriculture in our city. Over to you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Joanna. Good evening to everybody. Megan, if you could let me share myself. You gave me it already. Thank you. Beat me
Yeah, you should be.
Yeah, 2 steps ahead of me. Cool. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Perfect. Perfect. Oh, I'm sorry. Scratch that. Here we go. Present. Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm excited to be here and speaking with you. As Joanna said, my name's Thomas Wheat. My title is a mouthful. So I usually say I'm an urban farm manager. I work at the Bertie Bacchus Food Hub in Ward 5. UDC has 5 urban food hubs across the city, primarily located in historically food insecure neighborhoods. So mine is in Ward 5. We have ones in Ward 3, which is not a food desert, Ward 7, Ward 8, and Ward 1 as well. Just a little bit about me besides what I do with UDC. I'm also a policy analyst for the Aquaponics Association. I'm a USDA SARE fellow, which SARE is Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. So I'm really trying to approach food insecurity and sustainable ag from kind of a bottom-up approach, right? Doing the hands-on growing and working with the community to decrease food insecurity, but also looking at it from a policy angle, because I do think policy plays a huge role in a lot of the progression that this industry can have, and kind of the movement of urban agriculture in many ways is aided and kind of supported by a lot of progressive policies that DC has, and we could certainly do better as a city, but as that map showed, as a jurisdiction, we have a lot of farms and we're doing a lot of cool things in this space, and it's just exciting to play the small role that I play in kind of this movement. So real quick, and I'll go over these pretty quickly. I'm also going to start my timer to make sure that I don't go over. I want to be respectful to Greg, obviously. So I focus on what is called controlled environment agriculture. And in a nutshell, that's exactly what it sounds like, right? I grow in greenhouses in an environment that is kind of perfectly suited for crops, right? So we have controls over the temperature and the light exposure. We make sure the plants are getting the exact nutrients and water and everything that's needed to really optimize production. Not all controlled environment ag occurs in greenhouses. I do also have a shipping container unit that we'll speak about in general, but CEA, or controlled environment ag, is basically growing without Mother Nature, right? It's removing all the variables that can really impact a crop and impact the yields that a farmer has, and making it so that you have the most optimal conditions for the plants that you're growing. Hydroponics and aquaponics is specifically what type of controlled environment ag that I work on. I'll just say, just generally, those are 2 different soilless types of growing. So I have no dirt in my farm. All crops actually need is nutrients and water. And so we'll have a couple images later on in the presentation, but basically my crops are suspended in nutrient-rich water that increases the ability to kind of pack crops a bit closer. And then with the controlled environment, it also allows for those crops to grow 365 days a year, right? So when we're combating food insecurity, having that consistency across every single season is really important. And so using innovation like soilless systems, integrating verticality into our growing methods really allows us to make sure that we're reaching as many people with the healthy produce that we're able to grow on site. So hydroponics and aquaponics are both soilless types of growing. Hydroponics uses synthetic nutrients. Aquaponics actually is the integration of hydroponics and aquaculture. So aquaponics utilizes fish waste as that nutrient source. In a nutshell, without kind of getting in the weeds too much, the fish waste is what the plants, sorry about that, what the plants ultimately take up. So the fish excrete their waste, that nutrient-rich water gets pumped to the plants. The plants then take up those nutrients, and in doing so, they clean the water, and then that clean water kind of gets recycled back to the fish. So it's entirely closed loop, and you're able to not only grow healthy produce, but you can actually produce, sustainably sourced protein as well. So when you're talking about how to combat food insecurity, right? Fruits and vegetables are good. If you're tying in fish, be it tilapia or salmon, if you're really big scale, or shellfish or whatever it is, now you're really starting to make an impact in people's diets, and you're able to actually transition people to eat a bit more from localized sources. So those are the two specific practices that I integrate at my site. The last thing, and Joanna did a great job talking about food deserts. I also often use the term food apartheid. Desertification is in many ways a natural process. And so food apartheid, though it means the same kind of thing of not having access to healthy foods, it speaks a little bit more to the intentionality that goes behind that, right? It's not an accident that we see Ward 8 not having grocery stores and Ward 3 having a lot. That has to do with policies, it has to do with zoning, right? But it's not just a natural occurrence. There's a lot of people that make that a reality, and food apartheid kind of speaks to that intent that goes into the food conditions that different residents in DC face.
Thomas, I think we lost your presentation
Oh
there.
no, I'm so sorry. Thank you for saying something.
No problem.
Cool, let me put that back up. Can you guys see that?
Looks like it's coming. It's a white screen at the moment.
Okay. Let me see, maybe I'll try one more time. It says it's sharing. Sharing is paused.
Yeah, it says we see your screen, but it's just a white screen at the moment.
Okay. I'm gonna stop sharing and I'll try it one more time. And then if that doesn't work, I did send you those slides.
Yeah, I can pull it up.
Let me try one more time now.
Okay.
Okay, can you see that now?
Yeah.
Yes.
We
Okay.
see it.
Thank you. The last slide that you guys missed, all it was the definition. So it was just words. It wasn't.
Okay.
Again, we just kind of talked about, Joanna did a good job kind of framing the different communities in DC, right? But I often like to juxtapose Ward 3 and Ward 8. Ward 3 is historically considered kind of the most affluent ward. Ward 8 is historically kind of the lowest income ward. Ward 3 is also predominantly white. Ward 8 is predominantly black. So it's often a good kind of comparison. And I won't spend too much time on this. Joanna spoke about kind of the differences of food access. We can kind of see with about a comparable number of people, how many more grocery stores Ward 3 has than Ward 8, right? They also have a significantly higher median income in Ward 3 than Ward 8, and that creates a lot of the food realities that Joanna spoke about and Greg will be getting into as well. So I'll move past this real quick because I don't want to repeat what was already said, but I do think it's important to make sure that we're aware that if you live in Ward 8, right, even if you do have the buying power and the transportation and the ability to get to a grocery store, you're competing with 84,000 other people for that apple. It makes it that much harder to truly integrate healthy food into your diet. So what we're trying to do at UDC and kind of with my program at Bertie Bacchus and the food hubs in general is basically combat that reality we just spoke about, right? If communities are unable to have grocery stores in their local neighborhood, right? We basically are trying to step in and grow food at scale to feed the people. And so we're kind of often, we find ourselves in DC and nationally for that matter, kind of at the lowest tier of this diagram on the left-hand side, right? We have a very complex global food system, one that has multiple stops and multiple literal hands touching the food before it gets from farm to plate. And there's a lot of problems with that. There's a lot of environmental problems, but there's also a lot of cost that's associated when you need to also factor in paying that truck driver, let's say, to drive something, or paying that distribution warehouse worker to sort the food. And all those things often contribute to a higher cost for produce that travels an average of 2,200 miles. And so what we are trying to do is basically decrease that farm to table distance. So we may not ever get to that first tier, that home garden tier, but we do try to stay within that local farm CSA tier, right? We want to grow food in the community and have as few touch points as possible between us as a food producer and our end consumers, which are the residents of Ward 5 and the Bertie Bacchus community. There are a lot of benefits to decreasing and localizing food systems in general, but specifically for us, it's broadening access to healthy foods. We also work a lot with creating green jobs. I often joke that this urban ag movement is kind of Silicon Valley in the 80s. It's not quite here, right? But that wave is coming. And so making sure that we are educating people and feeding people is good. But kind of with that teach a man to fish mindset, we also want to make sure that we're helping people be a part of this change. And that means teaching them the skills that are needed to really contribute to this industry that is growing exponentially every single day. So a little bit more specifically about my food hub. I actually have 3 greenhouses and this weird thing on the right, which I'll explain in a second. But just to visualize a bit more, again, controlled environment ag, as I said, is inside. So the image on the left, what you're looking at is one of my greenhouses. I use soilless systems like I described. And so that allows me to grow a little bit different than a traditional farm would grow. So you're looking at different types of leafy greens, and you can see that I incorporate verticality in that greenhouse. So you can grow a lot more food in a cubic foot than a square foot, right? So if you're able to grow upwards, you can take advantage essentially of a lot of quote unquote wasted space, which allows us to produce and distribute significantly more per square foot than a traditional farm. So we normally do leafy greens in kind of those gutter systems, but we also really want to make sure that we're diversifying what we grow and therefore what we have to offer. So we also do berries. I'm doing strawberries and raspberries, 2 types of melons, hot peppers, tomatoes, cucumbers, all in efforts to make sure that, again, if we're really trying to combat food insecurity, people eat more than salads, right? And so just growing lettuce is great. But we really want to make sure that we're providing individuals that are able to take advantage of the food that we offer, a diverse array of options, right? And so that means more than just greens. That means all the things that we all eat every single day. There's also an entrepreneurial tilt to what we do. And so I'll often grow not only what I like to grow directly, right, and distribute directly to the customer or the consumer, but we also think about what downstream entrepreneurial minded people, what entrepreneurially minded people would want to take advantage of, right? So I grow hot peppers. Hot peppers are great. But if there was a local Ward 5 hot sauce maker that could use our peppers and then build into their business model that it's organic, that it's locally sourced, that it's sustainably grown, that only increases the overall impact that that food can have. And so a lot of what we grow, again, is distributed to different nonprofits in the area. We do have a farmer's market as well on Van Ness that we source to, but we also have a commercial kitchen on site. And when that is up and running, we'll be able to really tie in many of the food entrepreneurs that may not be able to afford a brick and mortar restaurant, let's say, but still make their own ketchup. And now they can take the tomatoes grown from my site and then make those kind of local ketchup, So it's building in that 2-prong method. It's really trying to feed the people, but also trying to build an awareness about the value that local food has, which often is broader than just that piece of lettuce. Often it is what types of businesses you can support once you have food that is more affordable and more localized. So I have 2 greenhouses that look like the left-hand image. One is hydroponics, so again, no fish. One is aquaponics, so that has fish in it. The image on the right is actually a new shipping container unit that I just had placed on site. So this is a fully automated, we're calling it the Ag Pod, fully automated system that is completely climate controlled, closed loops, and hydroponic. So it's similar to my other greenhouses, except that it is a 40 by 10 foot square foot shipping container. You can see the verticality that's still integrated in the system. So again, growing upwards and really taking advantage of that vertical space. So though this is about 400 square feet, it produces the same amount of crops that someone would need to use a full acre for if they were doing traditional farming. So with the nutrients that are calibrated specifically for each crop, with the climate that's adjusted to make sure that the air temperature and the humidity levels and everything, the CO2 levels are optimized for the crops you're growing. And then with the lights, the purple lights that you're seeing are actually LED lights that simulate sunlight. So to the crops, they have no idea that they're in a contained space, and they're getting all the things they need. They're getting sunlight, they're getting nutrients, and they're getting water. And so we're able to grow every single day of the year, 24 hours a day, inside this shipping container as well, which is only adding to what we're able to offer to the community. But it also ties in to our kind of entrepreneurial opportunities. So we're going to be doing, as we kind of roll out, we're just getting started, but as we kind of roll out our plans for this ag pod, we will be able to kind of integrate classes and kind of incubators that allow community members to come in and really get a firsthand look at not only what it is to grow, but more importantly, what it's like to kind of run a food business. And ideally, this is going to be something that is replicated throughout the city. This is the first kind of pilot edition. And then once we kind of have a proof of concept, we hope to expand to at least the wards that we currently are in, and hopefully to have multiple of these units in multiple wards across the city as well. So specifically for Birdie Bacchus, again, we donate everything for free. We are a government-funded group. I work for UDC, and so I look at everything that I grow as being, the communities. They literally paid for it with their tax dollars, and we try to make sure that we are continuing that free of charge kind of cost to the customer. And that also allows us to, again, really target those who are historically disconnected from the healthy food system. So we work with a bunch of nonprofits across the city, all of which are either in the specific food insecure wards, that would be Ward 1, 5, 7, and 8. Or if they're not in those wards, the ones that are specifically focused on really helping historically kind of overlooked communities, right? So we work with Food Not Bombs, for example. They're in Ward 6, so not one of those target wards, but they work specifically with individuals who suffer from homelessness. And so that's a community we want to support, right? So we donate to them as well. So by being a DC funded operation, we're really able to make sure that we don't continue a narrative of people needing to be wealthy to be healthy. We want to make sure that we're giving the freshest, the healthiest crops, but to those who often don't have the ability to access them. So that's a map of kind of the different nonprofits that we work with. And we're always open to partnering and working with any other groups as well. So after this, I'll share my information. If there are people or groups that want to get connected, please let me know. I'm happy to figure out what that looks like. Just in closing, I know I'm right at time right now. A lot of what we're doing as well, we spoke about kind of the adult side of the education, but I really am inspired by looking at kind of the future generations of agripreneurs, those who are kind of in this space and going to be the ones who are future growers. The average age of a farmer in America right now is about 62 years old, right? And that's going to be a problem. We need more people to be thinking about who's going to grow food and where that food is going to be ultimately sourced. And so working with the community, making sure we're getting individuals, students, kids into our sites to get them excited about food, to get them to understand the importance of food, to get them to taste healthy foods, all that stuff hopefully sets them on a trajectory into having a healthier diet and an overall healthier lifestyle. So that is me in a nutshell. I'll stop sharing my screen, and then I know we have a Q&A afterward. I'm happy to field any questions.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
And Greg, I'm going to pull up your photos now, so I will see if we screen share properly. Hold on one second.
Okay.
I did get your photos, by the way. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to take away the host privilege from Thomas.
I can start talking. I probably have a lot of preamble. So my name is Gregory King. Hello, everyone. I'm currently the president of the Blair Road Community Garden Association. Blair Road Community Garden is 5 acres located right off of Blair Road, bordered by New Hampshire Avenue and the railroad tracks, and it's coming up. But it's a large garden.
Yeah.
I started there as a gardener 2017, and was elected in 2019, early 2019, as president. And since then, a little background on myself, though, before I became president, I actually was also involved with UDC. I'm a small businessman, and I was trying to find a class to help me hone down my business plan writing skills. So I actually had taken a hydroponics and aquaponics entrepreneurship class at UDC, which then led me to take the master gardening training program there. So from that background, and of course another life corporate outside of gardening, I then became the president, and it's a bit of a challenge. We have 250 members. From varying, we're on national park land. A little history about the garden: that most of it is hearsay, but some of it has been proven that prior to the 1940s, it was one woman's property. She then passed it on to the National Park Service with the covenant that it always remain a garden. In the 40s, it was a victory garden. The association itself, the current association with the bylaws, et cetera, was created in 2014. Prior to that, it was more like having a manager and his other person that worked with him, who they did a lot of work. They put in water lines, mapped out a lot of the gardens. But with the new association, we've been able to deal with some of the garden challenges and continue to work with our members to grow organically. Basically, a lot of the things that I have learned, I've taken for granted, have changed significantly in terms of gardening. I grew up in New York. I'm actually here now working on another project, but as walking around in New York, I noticed that most of my neighbors here in Queens, Flushing, New York, they have gardens. And interestingly enough, the area, knowing the history of the area, it's been a sort of home to immigrants, first generation, second generation. And that's going back from when I was born. It was mostly Italian and German, and now it's Korean, it's East Indian, it's so many different cultures. But everybody, majority of people have gardens. Wherever there's a space, you can plant something, you can grow something. So coming from that background and coming to Blair, I've been privileged with working with everyone to really work towards a goal. The mission of the garden now, underneath my stewardship, is to provide our members with the opportunity, education, and assistance to successfully grow organic, nutritious plants within a safe, inclusive, and peaceful community environment. With that many gardeners, you can imagine there's all sorts of challenges, and it's become more of a study, a sociological study, anthropological study in terms of the opportunities that are presented. And then, as you can see from this slide here, this is one of the legacy gardens, meaning that this was before the association with its current bylaws and board was created. This is the average size of a garden, which could be, I think this one is about 60 by 120.
Wow.
It's not your
Big.
average urban garden. It is essentially an urban farm plot. So
Yeah.
what we've been working at is really trying to help create more opportunities and dissuade some of the challenges that we have. If you notice in the, actually, I think there's another slide that says monoculture.
Is that it?
Yes. So this particular slide is the cash crop. We have, there's a very strong culture of immigrants who come in of a particular country, Cameroon, and they love this green called huckleberry. Now, it is the same huckleberry that we're familiar with, but from their culture, it is something that they were raised on. Going a little history into the huckleberry in Cameroon, when the English, during the various wars way back when, would come into their countries and take over, they had to have a feed for their animals, because back then, they were talking pre-World War One. So a lot of the animals, the oxen, etc., they would grow this fast-growing green called huckleberry, and the animals would eat it. And of course, like many cultures that were underneath colonial rule, they learned that there is sometimes a benefit to certain things that the colonists might just feel that's just good for animals. They didn't deal with the berries; they deal with the leaves, and it's a heavy, nice, very rich green leaf. The trick to this is that you can actually harvest this at the beginning of the week, and by the end of the week, it'll be coming back to almost the same size. So there is a little bit of a black market that I've investigated into huckleberry, but it just goes to show that there are opportunities, and we have other gardeners and many other gardeners who aren't doing this type of monoculture. The challenge with this also is that they plant the same crop year after year in the same spot. They bring their cultural methods of farming in terms of building large trenches, which is a challenge in terms of soil maintenance, erosion. You can actually change this to the next slide. This is one of the trenches here. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can see a row of fencing, but above it is that trench, is the huckleberry that loves water. So they're happy to have these trenches filled with water. And again, it's more so of an aside of how I'm sort of caught in an interesting position from having the understanding of urban agriculture as a business, but then seeing how necessity has caused an opportunity has flourished that same idea in the DC area. We're working with these gardeners. There's a lot of programs that we're working with them and UDC, University of Maryland, to find them a home in larger places. There's a program where they're sharing farms, where if a person out in Maryland has a lot of space, they would basically let someone come in and farm that land under the watchful eye of an authority of some sort, because again, when you're talking about food production, you really want to be careful with what you're putting into the soil. Personally, I'm a soil grower, but I'm a smart soil grower. I use smart pots and raised beds. So in some senses, I try to control what I can of the environment. This is one of the challenges of the deep trenches. This is clay and silt that's coming off from that above garden, and it's just being drained down because they've dug down to a level where the soil is bare, and you're getting to that clay area. You have hydroponic pressure pushing the water up and across from the outer beds into the void of air. And you have runoff, you have erosion. So I find myself again from a gardener to, coming in to help sort out the renewal packages for the year and a mailing to a land manager, a lot of senses. So it's quite interesting. My main focus though is in education rather than enforcement. So being a master gardener, I've been helping to really educate people about soil maintenance, growing. There's so many different variety of growers, gardeners, as well as plants. The most recent years, last year, we noticed a lot more people in the garden working. Again, here's that the clay coming down the side there and the erosion. In the foreground, in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the huckleberry, which is probably recently harvested. Yes. So yeah, so it's coming also from various perspectives and standpoints. The DC area is just exploding in terms of urban agriculture, whether it be, and because of the pandemic, but I think a lot of people can really benefit from understanding what it means to grow your own food, whether it be herbs to, simple things like herbs, thyme, certain things are very simple to grow, to more complex things, tomatoes, having that vegetable, cucumbers, having the cucumber that snaps like a carrot, that will put you on the path of learning more about gardening, and how really all you really need is the elements. If you have the right amount of sun, you can manipulate your soil for the plants that you want, or you can go hydroponic. And really just, taking advantage of the weather here in DC. We were speaking earlier prior to this event how the air in DC is so humid. And my culture, I'm sort of first generation culturally from Barbados, of Asian. And the weather there this is sort of the same weather. And this past year I grew sugarcane. And I'm actually still growing sugarcane, because I took those roots and was able to just transplant them into another smart pot and have sugarcane growing. And some people have started growing bananas, which I just, yeah, successfully. So it's quite interesting to see what you can grow in DC. And again, it's all about the working with what you have in terms of environment, in terms of space. I've been very interested in what UDC is doing overall, because knowing I actually live not too far from the garden, and I'm sort of on the verge of being in that food desert. I'm very close to Bertie Bacchus. And I realized, just in having the conversation, that, yeah, I do most of my shopping in Maryland. I have to drive to the grocery stores. But if you want quality, that's what you have to do. Actually, I have to make it a point, and we work together to go to a place way up in Wheaton called H Mart, which is a Korean vegetable store. Wonderful vegetables. They change over fast. But I would love to get it more local food. Knowing that it could be grown, knowing that it could be easily transported and get it fresh without having all those other additives thrown on. Sweet potatoes, for instance, they dust them with various types of inhibitors, growth inhibitors, so that way the roots don't, you don't start getting the eyes. That's necessary for them to be shipped, but how good is that to be putting in your body? I'd rather know that, okay, my eggshells were in the soil, broke down into calcium, and now I'm eating them again. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell for me. I mean, we do have a lot of organizations. We've been partnering with our neighbors, the Greater St. Paul Baptist Church, City Wildlife, the Humane Rescue Alliance, and a school group from Tacoma Park. And they've all we started hosting them as sort of a shared plot. Desire, this past year, actually, that's when we got the extra 50 members, has been growing amongst a lot of younger gardeners, which is great. I love to see the newer families, and they're realizing, hey, if I have a little bit of space, our minimum size now that I try to create is a 14 by 14 foot square, but oftentimes it was a 14 by 20. This garden you're seeing in this particular photograph is managed by one or two people, but those people are workers. who work for, some of them are members that work. I think this particular plot is a combination of the actual member of the garden, but then we've noticed that there's a worker who's there during the day doing a lot of the work as well. So pandemic is working for us because we're working on that one plot per household rule, and really trying to work with National Park Service to ensure opportunities for everybody to garden. Another side note, we have members from all over the DMV. We have members from Adelphi, Arlington, various parts of Maryland who garden here with us. All you have to do is just put in your application and follow the rules.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. I'll start. My comment is that I find it fascinating. We're hearing from our two presenters kind of the two extremes of gardening, very down to, fingers in the soil and clay, but sort of adapting to urban dynamics, and then the sort of futuristic, very urban rooftop vertical agriculture applications. So I found it fantastic to hear about in more detail. For Thomas' question, the type of growing that you are engaged in seems to be to set up the greenhouses to provide the energy. That involves money and also cost and energy. How does that work? And obviously it is worth it because you're providing food growing faster, more efficiently. But is there a balancing act that we all need to think about?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, certainly. I'll just say kind of more broadly, I think that urban ag in DC and across the country, I'm a big proponent of controlled environment ag, but I do think it's going to take a balance of all these different methods, right? And often a greenhouse doesn't make any sense. If you're in a climate where, in San Diego, it might be kind of dry, but anywhere where it's super temperate and it's very hospitable to crops, there's no reason to necessarily have a greenhouse. Arguably in DC, it's a little too hot often, right? So there's a balancing act. And I think that geography, I think that the microclimate that you're in, I think that whatever situation, be it a rooftop or be it an old landfill site or whatever it is, can kind of dictate which one of these methods makes the most amount of sense.
Right.
But specifically to your question about upfront costs, yeah, controlled environment ag costs a lot of money. I mean, that's one of the biggest hurdles, I think, which is why we don't see a lot of successful businesses that are doing this. With that being said, though, I mean, I think that it's an investment that makes a lot of sense. With the city, for example, I spoke to Councilmember McDuffie is the Ward 5 council member, and he did an event and he was talking about how they just spent, $20 million on a new rec center, and that's amazing. People understand rec centers, people get the value of rec centers. If someone gave, a controlled environment agriculturalist $500,000, right? You can do some amazing things with 1/40th of the amount of money that they spent on that rec center. So I think that often, though it is a high cost, in the scheme of things, not only does it make sense to spend that money, but it also can be very much a drop in the bucket compared to what cities or institutions or companies often spend on other things. I think the difference is understanding why it's valuable to spend that money. And right now we get that a rec center is good. We don't really get why like fish poop grown food makes any sense, right? So a lot of it is changing the narrative. The last thing I'll say also is I think that as we start to see a change in honestly pricing models and policies, I think we're going to start seeing a shift in basically how artificially affordable a lot of crops are, right? And so in a
Yes.
hydroponic system,
Yes.
like what I grow in, I use 95% less water than traditional farming. So if water was adequately priced and we didn't subsidize it and give it to all these giant mega farm corporations, that actually is a huge savings. We just don't have a pricing model that really rewards the good types of farming, right? So I think that as we see costs of technology go down, like we always see, and as we see the appropriate environmental costs and the labor costs actually get built into a pricing model, hopefully that burden, that financial burden, will start to change and equalize a bit more.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that, you know, one of the differences between I mean, well, sort of, let me step back. The other thing about DC that I've noticed, I've been in DC 23 years, and I noticed it's definitely become more of a foodie town. It's definitely one of the East Coast most traveled to, you know, people go out to restaurants, but also from that, there's also a level of exploration. And I think that people, once they understand the dynamics of a taste of fresh food, that they will realize that the store-bought food isn't really that good, and it totally makes a difference.
Yeah. 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 Any more? Anybody would like to talk about food before we all go to dinner?
I'd also like to say that yeah, I mean, it is, there's a lot of opportunity. It will, in terms of food deserts, there will be there'll be a reason for people to look for places and to explore this. It's really just trying to direct them. Like one of the comments I was saying about what our commercial gardeners are doing, it's really just more of a question of teaching them that there are other ways to do things, because sometimes they, like, you know, my biggest fear is that they use uncured manure, animal manure, and that somebody gets sick. So I'm really harping on them, and unfortunately, we've actually gone to the extent of getting some leaf compost from Maryland. City College Park, Maryland has some wonderful, wonderful leaf compost, and we've been using, you know, actually bringing that in to dissuade people from using animal products, because there is that level of understanding.
Okay. Actually, if I might, Susan next, jump in. You probably know about biosolids from Blue Plains. They are actually processing our poop and processing it so well that it is a soil amendment fertilizer. Yes, but that what you said, Greg, triggered that little thing. These days, they, I think, make some money by selling it in Maryland, but they do give it away to community gardens. So, but you need to take your own track. So.
But Joanna, it smells horrible.
No, well, it may smell horrible in Blue Plains, but when it got
I've
to
had it before.
garden, it was fine. So, and it made kale grow like crazy. So,
But I like to share that I've been growing a garden for about 3 years, and I think I may have skipped 1 year. And I would like some good recommendations on fertilizers. I heard that some bone moss of some sort, if I'm saying it right. Can you recommend? Can anyone recommend good? Because they say that Miracle Grow is just, it's no good.
Well, it's if you're in a community garden, organic, yes, organic, no Miracle Grow.
What about compost? How do you use compost?
Well, I'd have to, there is no simple answer, I think. But maybe we can develop some sort of a reference list Thomas, Greg, for people to share with people, because there is a lot of information out there, but and the wealth of solutions, the leaf mulch, and I think Parks and Recreation may be allowing people to get it. I've gone to Fort Cotton to pick up some stuff. So there are options, but no simple, quick answer right now. And Susan, I think, had a
I do
question.
have a question.
I'm sorry.
It has to do,
Hold on. Yeah.
Sorry, Susan. I'm sorry. I was just saying, Pamela, if you need some compost, we do composting at my site. You can come on down.
There you go. Okay.
Okay.
yeah,
Back to
that's good,
Susan.
good. There's some startup costs to gardening. And if you have, like, especially I'm interested in the community gardens and the community gardens in the city. Is there a program to help people have an upfront startup money?
For a community garden?
Yeah, the community garden, is there any way, if you have a new person who's just learning how to garden, and it costs money to get started. And I don't know how much it is. I just know, I remember when I was going out to buy plants, tomato plants, I paid that much for those tomato plants? Okay, so that was, how do other people handle that? Especially
Well,
when
I would have to say, I'm sorry, I would have to say that, it depends. It depends. There's a lot of, again, being in DC, there's a lot of people who are doing seed giveaways. I know my daughter hosted a couple of them for Earth Day. There's a lot of organizations who are sharing, even our garden, who are sharing seedlings, some certain gardens you can talk to. When it comes to soil, though, I mean, it really just, it's not necessarily, I've been there. I've spent, $55 for a bale of Pro Mix with mycorrhiza and all these other great beneficials. But sometimes, you could just make it out of yourself. We use wood chips in our pathways. And we've learned that if you, in the beginning of the season, if you turn the wood chips to get out all the weeds, the soil underneath has broken down to such a consistency that's perfect. You just do a certain.
Put it in a plot.
Yeah. You could probably get a good 4x4 gardens going. And I'm saying 4x4 in terms of the amount of footprint. So
Okay.
if you had various containers that would make a 4 foot by 4 foot square, you could probably do that for about $50.
Oh, startup? Okay, great, thank you.
Right, yeah.
And
Yeah, I think seedlings can run into real money, in our neighborhood Fragers will, $5 for a little tomato.
Yeah.
But if you can find people to share a bag of little seeds and put some sweat equity into it, the cost can come down. But then you need to have the patience, the space, some resources, mental, emotional, and money to get things going.
Yeah.
But it can be done on fairly low dollar amounts.
So
Yeah.
Susan, I would just to add on to that, agree with everything, obviously. Always try to start from seed. That's a good way to really save a lot of money. I can buy a pack of seeds, 200 of them for $5, but then you buy one seedling plant for $5, right? So if you get it from seed, that often is a good way to decrease costs. Also keep an eye out. The Doug Network stuff that we spoke about, that's really good. They have a listserv and they highlight a lot of grants that DC has. DC is very unique in that we have a lot of money for residents, for community gardens to solve that exact problem. So keep an eye out for that, whether it's, we're one of 3 cities that have a Department of Urban Agriculture, whether it's grants coming out of that, whether it's USDA grants coming out of the Department of Urban Ag and Innovative Production, whether it's USDA SARE. There's a lot of money out there that unfortunately people don't know about. But it's there, and I've often heard a lot of people saying like we don't get enough applicants, especially from these urban environments. So just keeping your finger on the pulse and really trying to find that money, that free money. It does exist. It's sometimes hard to get to, but it is out there.
Okay, yeah. I didn't realize we have a Department of Agriculture, but yeah, great.
Yep, we're one of 3. It is now us, Philadelphia, and Atlanta that have directors of urban agriculture. So Kate Lee is the director for that department. She's doing great work. But we're fortunate that we have somebody who can advocate on our behalf and really try to make the city invest more in these opportunities.
Yeah.
And again, I have to put in a plug for UDC because they have, between UDC and DC Department of Parks and Recreation, most of those things you'll find on the Doug network as well, but they have a lot of educational courses for whatever you might be interested in terms of urban gardening, whether it be flowers. I've personally been speaking about vegetables, but flowers as well.
Yeah.
And
We have a lot of resources. Yeah.
I'm
and a
sorry.
lot of organizations. I was sort of overwhelmed finding all these names. Oh, who is this? And oh, they are related to that. But 30, 40 of them, and all of them making things happen, which is great.
Yep.
All right. Any more questions, comments, thoughts?
I would say for those of you, well, most of us probably at one point or another had the experience of gardening when you were younger, or a relative or someone who had their fingers in the soil. And I would say, think back to those simple things. I'm finding that a lot of the education that I'm getting now are from our I call them experienced gardeners, those that have been there 40 years. And planting with the moon, and north south, really getting to know all those various aspects of outdoor gardening is very interesting, important, and really just simple. Epsom salt is magnesium, and that's a good additive to your soil.
Right. And eggshells, good. Collect, stick around tomatoes. Yeah. And I just had an email from a friend, said, oh, I rooted basil, and I've learned from my grandmother to root geraniums, propagate things. Said basil, oh, I didn't try that. So we always are there and more to learn.
Aloe vera, the actual aloe vera piece is a good rooting gel. Natural organic gel.
Yes, that too. All right. Well, I think our time is up, and I myself enjoyed it very much. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for everybody for joining us.
And thank you, Joanna.
And let's go and do some gardening.
Dig in the dirt.
There we go. Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks so much.
And do some
Bye.
seed sharing. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thanks for
Good
coming.
to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.